and
Mhm.
I hauled down this mobile cart thing that I had put together on a hand truck dolly system, and I demoed it, and a guy bought it from me. And it just kind of clicked that if I made another one, I probably would sell that one too, right? So that's kind of how the idea of getting into selling and making stuff started. It was sort of by accident.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. We've got a great show for you today. We're joined by the CEO of Tucker. Shawn's on with us today. A very well-known company in the industry, and I'm so excited to hear your story. I think there's probably a bunch of interesting twists and turns in there from where you guys got started as a cleaning contractor all the way to running one of the more well-known suppliers in the window cleaning industry. So I'm excited to do that, Shawn. Thanks for hopping on with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity.
And Ryan, it's always good to see you too.
Yeah, no, I'm here also. Yeah, don't forget me.
Ryan's here. Ryan's here. No,
Yeah,
no
yeah.
problem. So I'm totally fascinated by people's entrepreneurial stories and what gets them into business. Take us back to the beginning, when you decided to kind of go out on your own, start a cleaning business. Tell us a little bit about your origin story as an entrepreneur.
Sure. Yeah. I got into contract cleaning actually in the late 90s in the Atlanta area. I was doing soft washing and decks and staining decks and soft washing roofs and houses. And I never really heard that term soft washing when I was doing it, but that's what we were doing. And I remember distinctly my exit as an employee from that company. I'd had some time planned off, and I came in, and as those companies can be, you go one day to the next with enough help and not enough help, and your schedule's overloaded. So I remember the day before I was supposed to take a nice trip that I had planned and approved. They basically told me, you can't have that day off or that time off, and if you do take it, then you're basically no longer working here. And so as of that meeting, I kind of left and no longer worked there. So that set in my mind kind of how I did not want to be treated or treat anybody going forward. But that's really how I got into contract cleaning. It wasn't until I moved to Colorado with my wife that I got into window cleaning. I was taught window cleaning by a construction cleaning janitorial company. So, everything we did was construction cleanup. So disaster sites everywhere we went. So it was deep cleans is what I was taught. We ended up, she got pregnant with our first son, and we decided, okay, we better go back to the East Coast where all the family and the resources are, because we were out in Colorado by ourselves. And that's when I went and started working for somebody, and we got on our feet, and then we decided to go back to Colorado. So I started a window cleaning business in Colorado, and it was probably not 3 years or so into it. I was looking for water fed equipment to help me access some job sites that I couldn't really get to from a height standpoint. And for the most part, everything from an innovation and quality of equipment standpoint was in England and the UK, right? The Brits were way ahead of us at the time in terms of the poles and the equipment. So I imported some poles and for my own use, and started building my own water system. I had no clue what I was doing. I ruined system after system in terms of the filtration, and just kind of fumbled my way through that. And I think it was 2008. It's funny. I don't do real well with dates and timelines. I've realized that over the last few years, people will say, "When did you buy Tucker?" And I don't even remember what year it was. But um, I think it was about 2008. It might have been '06, where I went to a trade show that the UAMCC was putting on in San Antonio, and I hauled down this mobile cart thing that I had put together on a hand truck dolly system, and I demoed it, and a guy bought it from me. And it just kind of clicked that if I made another one, I probably would sell that one too, right? So that's kind of how the idea of getting into selling and making stuff started. It was sort of by accident. I didn't really have some grandiose plan that I was going to become a manufacturer or even build stuff for people. I liked window cleaning. So that's how
But
I got into the service side.
Did
so
did you? Sorry.
was it
I,
easy for you in the beginning to start a business? I know that's like a really hard leap for a lot of people. I mean, did it kind of start clicking for you, or was it hit or miss?
Yeah, I mean, it was hit or miss for a number of years. On the service side, and I didn't know what success looked like or felt like. I remember on the service side getting into winter and my wife and I talking about how, what are we going to do through winter? I went out and developed a snow shoveling route. I just hustled to do whatever I could to just get through winter because for a lot of guys, it's feast or famine, right? It's spring and summer. It's just everything you can do to stay up, and maybe into the holidays you stayed busy with last minute cleanings for holiday cleanings and stuff like that. But no, it certainly wasn't easy. And on the cleaning side, the service company that we owned, Prism Window Cleaning is what it was called. Every year it was like we were starting over. You'd build up to maybe one guy that was out in a truck and you were out in a truck, so you had two vehicles on the road. Winter would hit, you'd have to let them go. You're trying to reinvent it every spring. So I've always had like a pretty big respect for anybody that builds an organization from a service company standpoint that can scale. Because I found the manufacturing company a whole lot easier for me to scale than the service business.
yeah, when you were in the service business, was it like commercial high rise or like what like when you were doing window cleaning, was it residential still? Since that's kind of your like that's
Yeah,
kind of where most
yeah, it
people
was.
start, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I never got into high rise. I'm not a big heights guy, so I never got into that kind of work. I mean, whatever we could reach with a pole when it comes to commercial work, we would go
Hmm.
after. So 5, maybe 6-story work, but it was always from the ground. But it was primarily a high end residential business. Where we're at in Douglas County, I remember when we moved out here, it was like top 5 in the country for median household income. So you got a lot of
Hmm.
wealth in a fairly non-populated area. So we really went after that. We'd have residential window cleaning jobs that were $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. And so it was primarily a high end residential cleaning company, window cleaning only.
Okay. And then yeah, what was that first machine that or system I guess that you built? I guess it wouldn't be a machine for the first pure water system. Was that like pieces you like cobbled together in your garage, or was it like, hey, I'm just going to do whatever I can to figure something out that works? So yeah, how was that like? How did that first like system come to exist?
Yeah, I mean, it was exactly what you said. I cobbled it together. I don't remember the name of the company that I got. I mean, all of these water purification components can be purchased online, right? It's like I'm gonna go pick up an RO membrane, and you know,
Hmm.
if you don't plumb an RO membrane correctly, you ruin it almost instantly, right? So it's not in any way that when you go online and you order a housing for a membrane and a membrane, it comes and it tells you how to put it together. I mean, that doesn't exist. And
Right.
so, or it didn't. It may now, frankly, but at the time I ordered it, I plumbed it together, I ran it, I looked at it, I said the water quality is worse than what went into it. Like, this doesn't work.
Right. Yeah.
Called up the company, called them up. That's when they educated me about plumbing. But essentially, you're out the money. And I remember, it was $300-400 for those two components, and at the time that was half a day, full day of window cleaning. So I was like, okay, honey, I ruined this. What do you think? Well, I don't think you're going to get another one anytime soon, right? So
Yeah.
it took a while, and it was one of those things where you just kind of stuck to it and you figured it out. But I mean, it was literally on a hand truck that you could buy from Home Depot. Guys still do that. They'll go out, they'll buy the components because there's some savings to be had if you pick up the components by themselves and you assemble it. But we actually have that unit at the building now because some years later, I reconnected with the guy who bought it. We're still connected today, and we were making much better machines at the time. And I said, I'll trade you one of these brand new ones for that one because I wanted it. It was like,
Yeah.
I never intended to sell it to begin with. So it's actually here at the building. But yeah, absolutely, it was definitely that sort of, okay, will this work? Will that work? and no one was doing mobile carts. I mean, it just wasn't something that was going on. So there was nothing to really look at and kind of try and find a way to do it. It was a lot of trial and error from that standpoint, for sure.
So what happens? You go to the show, you have this demo unit, it sells, light bulb goes off. You're like, huh, probably could sell more of those. What did you do from there? Just go back to your garage and like order more components, put a few more together. How do you kind of grow from there?
At the time, there was no real message. What do you want to call them? Chat rooms or
Forums.
whatever, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
forums.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
was not the thing, right? There was a window cleaner out of Wisconsin named Gary Maurer, and Gary had a email list. So you would send an email out to this subscribe group, and one at a time you'd start to get replies back via email. It was like the slowest process ever. But that was word of mouth then, right? That was how all the guys
Mhm.
were networking. So someone would ask, what's everybody using for water fed poles? And I would say, well, I got this carbon fiber thing. And then, nobody was using carbon fiber at all at the time. So that really kind of took off before the water systems was the poles. So I realized, okay, I could buy 3 more of these out of the UK and bring them in. I wasn't making any real money by the time the customs bill and duties and everything showed up a month later. I had no clue, right? So
Mhm.
that kind of took off before the water systems. But at that show that I went to in San Antonio, Jim Willingham was there, and Jim Willingham is basically a larger than life legend in the window cleaning industry. He passed away a number of years ago, but he would enter the window cleaning contest at the IWCA. Had a big cowboy hat. He was out of Lubbock, Texas. He was larger than life, and Ettore had sent him there to demo water systems for them. And so here I
Mhm.
am, like, the guys are like, show us what you have. He's got this van mount thing with like 200 gallons. I mean, it was basically like $10,000 or $15,000 compared to, $1,000 cart, right? And so I remember being in a room with him and just thinking, I don't know what I'm doing here, you know? And it was not until we started talking and he said, I'm going to go second, right, for the demos. And I was like, okay, sir, whatever you need. So I demoed, he demos, and like I said, the only thing that happened that day in terms of sales was the cart that I had was purchased. He didn't sell a unit. I'm sure he had to go back to Ettore or whatever. But the norm was basically at that time, these guys would go around the country and try and sell these things. But price point wise, they were way out of whack. You had to buy a full size cargo van just to get off the ground. Guys would still
Mhm.
laugh at you because it wasn't the norm. I mean, the work that a lot of these early guys did with trying to get window cleaners to understand and invest in water fed window cleaning, a lot of us are really just kind of like, standing on their shoulders in a sense in terms of what we're able to accomplish today. Because back in the day, guys would just laugh at you. I still remember the moment I was working in Atlanta with the guy I was working for, and we were doing commercial route work. So we were doing all the public stores in the area, the grocery stores, all this kind of stuff. And we were in the parking lot one day, and a guy walked up to us, and he was a window cleaner, but he was working for a company trying to sell water systems. And he tried to tell us about it, and we both were just like, this guy's a nut job. What do you mean you could just like scrub the window with water and rinse it and move on? Like, what is he talking about,
Yeah.
right?
You
It
need
turned
soap.
You need something, right? Like this
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And so it just kind of went over my head at the time, and that was real early. Turns out that guy was Don Shute, who went on to work for IPC and Ionic and another legend, kind of larger than life guy that is no longer with us either. But he and I developed a relationship over the years that carried on for quite a long time. And so, as far as getting into it, it was sort of organic, right? I didn't know that that's where I was going to go, but when I look back, it's just sort of like the path of least resistance was to get into sales and out of trying to hustle and get more service accounts.
So those early sales came in. You were doing it like a lot on the email. You're sending emails through the guy's email list, and you're getting some stuff back. And how far did that take
Yeah,
you?
it took me up until about when Window Cleaning Resource launched their online forum, right? I mean, those guys, I try to think back to how that all launched and where that all started. That was a forum, and then as I recall, it probably made sense for them to start selling everybody on their audience equipment, right? So I was on there early on. I was an early adopter of that platform. and then your audience just became bigger, and you had a way to essentially sell there. But it was probably 2013, 2014 before any traction really started to get put in place in terms of a supply or assembly company.
And I'm just because of my fascination, not real important, but you were buying the carbon fiber poles and bringing them in. At some point, did you start to make them, or
We didn't make them until we bought Tucker. So
okay?
I would say 9 years ago. So, the history of that, the importing, we were importing a brand that I'm not even sure if it's still around over there. They're not relevant in the United States. And, I had a relationship with these guys. And then we got into a another brand, Gardner, that is very much around at this point, and we were selling the Gardner brand very well. We had the exclusive on it early on. We sold a lot of those poles. There's still a lot of those poles sold in the United States today. But early on, Gardner poles, they had four carbon fiber sections, and the clamping mechanism was the metal clamp from like your bike seat post, right?
Oh
So that
yeah,
simple like
yeah, that didn't
latch,
work.
it
Yeah.
it worked fine, but the problem was it only had so much adjustability. There's only one size, right? So
Yeah,
the reason the poles were only like four, maybe five sections, as I recall, was because there was only so much adjustability. So as the diameters
right.
got larger, it wouldn't work, or smaller, frankly. So, but we worked together for a number of years. They developed a clamp, ended up doing a plastic ejected molded clamp, and I was really big into water systems, and I never wanted to make poles. So it was a good relationship. We were making water systems under our corporate brand, Reach Higher Ground, and they were selling us the poles, and we had the exclusive. So we were redistributing, we were selling direct. I mean, it was great. And then when we bought Tucker, they basically came in and said, "We're not going to do this anymore for you," because they looked at it as a competing relationship, which ultimately they were right. They saw that was coming.
Hmm.
So that was the early people that worked with me within the organization will tell you, he never wanted to make a poll because it's very complicated. And honestly, still the poles that are on the market today, the majority of them are just rebranded. They're coming out of one place because it's a big investment to get into. And we just wanted to do water because that's what I was excited about. So when
Well,
we got into the poles, that was a bit of frustration for a long time.
well, it's expensive to have a big enough. What's the word for it? The oven, the vacuumed oven. You have to bake carbon fiber, and I'm just thinking about like back around that same time. I had a buddy who took on making carbon fiber car parts for his project in his apartment and oven, and I'm imagining like, okay, how are you making that at the time? Out of your garage. But it makes sense that you had a supplier for it because that's quite a it's a process for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean to this day we're not in the carbon fiber manufacturing business. There's no one really in the United States that's set up to do that economically. You look at a $400 water fed pole that you could buy from us or anybody else. If that carbon fiber was made in the United States, it'd be over $1,000 for that same thing. It's
Hmm.
just pure economics, right? So what we do that is different from everybody else is that's the only thing that we import, though. So we bring the
Yeah.
tubes in, and we own the molds to all the plastic parts for every clamp body, all the levers, all the adjustability pieces, all the gooseneck parts. We're not an importer or private labeler. We're making all those components in the United States, and just assembling. So we can count on one hand the number of things that we import from offshore, and we're always looking for ways to figure out can we do this in the United States this year? Is the volume there? Is it going to work? And carbon fiber tubes, it's just not there.
I could see that. I could see that.
Yeah.
So you're growing this business. You're making the equipment. You're selling. You're importing the other pieces. At what point, how do you end up buying Tucker? How does all that kind of come about?
Yeah, we were pretty well established with Reach Higher Ground. I'd say we had five or so employees at the time, and we were happy doing our niche little thing, importing the other poles. And what we started to notice is that people were calling us from within the industry, wholesale suppliers, janitorial stores, mom and pops, asking for parts to Tucker poles. And it just sort of clicked for me one day after a few of these calls that, the company must not be doing all that well, right? If they're not able to get a hold of Tucker, if they can't get what they need from Tucker today, let's see what's going on. And I had known, Tucker is a family business. Tucker is the family's last name. So I knew Robin Tucker, which was the grandson of the guy who started the company. So Tucker started in 1957. So this is third generation. I knew Robin because when I would go to IWCA trade shows, Robin was there with his wife with their products in the booth. And so we would talk about innovation, and they always sold an aluminum pole. He never wanted to get into carbon fiber or plastic clamps. And he had all his own reasoning. As business owners, sometimes we just get tunnel vision, or we think we know what's best for the market or ourselves or whatever. And so I tried to reach out to him through Tucker, the window cleaning company or supply company, and they would never answer the phone, which is what these guys were telling us.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to dig around a little bit, and I found out that Robin was more into real estate. And so there was a real estate company. So that's actually how I got him to pick up the phone. Was I called the real estate company, and he answered the phone.
Right.
So, but when we bought the company, it was essentially going out of business. I mean, it was out of business. They had closed the factory. They had let the people go who had worked there. There was basically two guys making everything. I mean, it wasn't really a large company. They were just good at what they were doing. Their heyday really was in the 80s and 90s. And so there was two guys. I want to say they were both in their 70s. And when I struck up the conversation with Robin about buying the company, we actually, once we struck a deal, we reopened the manufacturing facility, which was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And I went out there for a few weeks and brought one of my key guys at the time out there. And I had to sit down with these two older gentlemen and convince them to come back to work for this kid and teach us everything we needed to know about making Tucker products, because no one knew. And they eventually decided to do that. So we ran the Cedar Rapids location for a while, and then we relocated all the manufacturing to Colorado.
What did that gain you? Like, what was the biggest benefit that came from buying Tucker for you guys? Was it the branding or the technology that kind of they had to do something you guys didn't do?
I mean, above and beyond, it was the brand name. So, if you talk to a guy who's been around in the industry for a while, they're not using a water-fed pole. They're not using a specific brand of pole. They're Tucker polling, right? And so, they go out and they use their Tucker pole. Well, that Tucker pole might be one of 5 other companies' brands, but they were taught to Tucker pole with a Tucker pole in the 80s or 90s, and maybe the company's bought a newer pole since. But in water-fed window cleaning, for quite a long time there, especially when we were looking at buying the company, Tucker was synonymous with water-fed window cleaning, like Kleenex is in the tissue industry, right? That's a brand, and everyone says, "Give me a Kleenex," but it could be any other company's product. So definitely the branding, and it was twofold, right? Like, it's a household name to a lot of people, which is great, but it was also with a lot of people, it carried a negative connotation, right? Because at the end, they burned a lot of bridges, from what I could tell, right? You've got a supplier that was selling your product for 20, 30 years generationally, and all of a sudden you're not answering the phone and you left them in a lurch. And so we've had to rebuild the brand from a product standpoint as well as a reputation on a couple of fronts. Definitely overseas, we're still making a lot of effort to rebuild the brand in international markets like Europe. But it definitely was a brand play more so than a product play, because most of what they were selling, we discontinued within a year anyway. I mean, it was 80% of the product line we didn't really have an interest in.
So whenever you acquire a company, there's usually like one of two things happen, right? It's either under new management, thank goodness it was going terrible, or it's under new management, oh man, I hope they don't ruin the brand. Like, it sounds like it was kind of the first of the two, where people were kind of tired over the brand. But was there any like competition with, maybe not competition is the right word, but was there any like battle with the contractors who were still like diehard Tucker guys and then all of a sudden like you're having to come and prove that, hey, it's new management, but like I promise you we're still going to do the good stuff good and we're going to do the bad stuff better.
Yeah, and honestly, first time I had to sell that was to the guys that had been essentially fired at the end of working there. So I got pretty
Mm-hmm.
good at that, right? I got good at trying
Mm-hmm.
to explain that we were gonna, it was like the phoenix rising from the ashes. We were gonna take care of this thing and really honor the family legacy, the family name, and because it was dead, for all intents and purposes, and we still have to this day guys that'll call up and say, I need a part for my Tucker pole. And we'll say, okay, well, which model do you have? And it's aluminum pole. And they haven't
Mm-hmm.
been able to buy that pole in 10, 12 years. So it's a testament to like how these were made. But this was like the World War II era mentality of how to build stuff, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so we got a guy called us. We had a guy call us the other day and express that he needed parts for a pole, and we are like, we really can't help you. I mean, it hasn't been around for 5, 10 years, right? And so we've gotten really good at early on we had to get people to realize that we were going to do the right thing. And there's some things that we didn't change that some people still will tell you changed because it's not exactly how they did it, right? Some of the brushes, for instance, I mean, the brushes that they made, a lot of them we still make the exact same way. We just don't take small strips of plastic, chop it up, and use them to make brushes out of them. We have an injection mold that makes, a cosmetically good looking piece of plastic, right? But because it doesn't look like that, they say it's totally different. But the recipe is completely the same. And
Mm-hmm.
you got guys, it's in every industry, right? If a manufacturer uses blue hose for 20 years and they switch to yellow, a guy will call and say this yellow hose is nowhere near as good. It's just a color, right?
Yeah.
So you get that a lot. But the biggest thing for us early on was trying to understand the family, trying to understand the legacy, because that was the most important part for me over the years. Early on was really just keeping that name, respected, because they started the whole thing. I mean, there was no one doing this in the 50s, much less the 70s and into the 80s. It was theirs.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead, Brad.
No, you're good. You're
uh,
good.
I, no, I was just, and maybe I'm jumping too much, but yeah, I'm curious now that like you've owned the company for a while. It seems like based on everything. So I don't know if you know, I was a window cleaner for 8 years, I think, residential. Just started getting into like pure water cleaning when I stopped. But your company is definitely one that I followed for a long time, and it seems like you guys are always trying to innovate. I think I told Brad before we got on, I was like, Shawn, from my understanding, is a guy who's like always trying to push and like change things and make things better and innovate new products. And I know you work with a lot of distributors and like other manufacturers to kind of custom make systems for them. And yeah, I was just curious, like, what is there like something that you guys are like excited about with the company, like in the direction you're going, and like what's the next big thing, or are you guys like still pushing new innovation, or is it like, are you really right now trying to focus more on like, hey, let's perfect what we have, or are you looking at the future and what's coming next?
Yeah, it's interesting. My mindset is always on innovation, right? I, I I can still remember when the first time an employee told me that we really needed to slow down with what we introduced to the market, because a product has a life cycle, right? And so, I'd be like, hey, here's the next best thing. And, the industry would just be recognizing and responding to the last best thing we put out. And so, in a lot of ways, I've built a team around me that kind of slows that down and really allows us as a business to capitalize on um, the next innovation, right? So, there's a lot of things in the pipeline. I took a lot of time off last year to sort of put myself in a place where I was under a little bit more control in that aspect too. Because if I'm around, I'm like, I'm learning. But the reality is if I'm around, I'm wanting to push the next thing. And we've had a lot of products in the pipeline for a while now that we're getting close. And to your point, it's you release something, you get some feedback, you tweak it, you perfect it, and that life cycle could be 6 to 8 years, which, early on felt like forever to me, but I look at what we're doing right now with a lot of our brushes and a lot of our other things. And these things have been on the market for 6, 7 years. And they're not things that we will take off the market when, the next iteration or next version of innovation comes along. It'll just be kind of a legacy type thing. But there's a lot, and luckily I have some good people around me now that, whether it's from a marketing standpoint or whatever else, I'm not just bouncing around, doing whatever I want anymore. And so that's actually a good thing as an entrepreneur and a business owner.
Yeah.
Is there a resistance to a certain speed of innovation in the industry? It's like you can just outpace what they can digest.
I will tell you where I've seen that happen the most. And I don't know if other manufacturers run into this. But normally where that happens is not necessarily with the end user, but the suppliers, right? So, especially early on, it's like, hey, I've got the greatest idea. Yeah, who are you? Right. And so I've gone from that to, if we put out a product, there's a demand for it, and hopefully the market will recognize that we put a lot of time and energy into things, and go buy it regardless of where they shop. Right. And we sell to, you know, a lot of distributors in the United States, much less worldwide. So most people don't buy direct from us. And so it was early on, you'd get a guy that owned a window cleaning supply shop to invest in some of your product, put it on the shelf, sell it to their customers. And then you send an email that says latest and greatest. And they go, wait a minute, we just bought this stuff. What happens to this stuff? Right. And so in that sense, we've had to learn and start to respect those relationships a lot more than the end user ones in that same regard. Tomorrow, if you put out a new product for a window cleaner, they're going to buy it because there's not a lot in that space. It's a small industry, right? So you see manufacturers put things out, and honestly, now things are coming out at a rate that is way faster and way more frequent than it ever was before. The brass squeegee was around forever before anyone could get anything else, right? So, but there is a level of thoughtfulness that has to go into releasing a product, when it's going to come out, all those kinds of things. Not just from an end user standpoint, but all of your customers, be it a supplier that has a bunch of inventory that you're going to make obsolete as soon as you open your mouth, right? So it's a really thoughtful process at this point with the business.
What's your favorite part in running a manufacturing business? It seems like you really enjoy the innovation side of it.
I like that. That part comes naturally to me. That's the expensive part too, frankly. I'm not an engineer by trade, so you bring an engineer in that you work with. That's kind of, if you've ever talked to a lawyer and they hit that stopwatch and every minute you've talked is billed out. Engineer firms are the same way, right? So it's kind of like if I had that skill of taking it out of my head and onto the computer, it'd be a whole lot faster, frankly, but also a whole lot less expensive. But I will say that the piece that I've really started to enjoy the most within the business is the production department itself. So getting all the people that make this stuff at this point to really be excited about putting out the best product, and understanding that when we ship it to a guy that bought it, if any of the guys buying from us or girls buying from us, they're working incredibly hard for every one of those dollars, right? Service contractors work hard, and I have that perspective, and I know the same conversations that go on within these households. It's a lot of owner operators that are in this industry. So over dinner, over whatever, the guy or the girl is saying to their partner, I'd really like to buy this and invest this much, and I really think it's going to change the company, right? We've all had these kind of conversations as contractors. And getting the team to understand that a guy that buys a $3,000 or $4,000 kit that's been using a $40 kit from Home Depot is making an investment a lot of times in a way that he might not be able to afford, but he's really kind of, he's sure this is going to change things based on his research. And the last thing we want to do is put out a product that when they get it, there's an argument internally, or they come back to us and they say, this isn't right or whatever. And so I've really got a group of people that are working for us in the production department at this point that are all buying into that culturally, that what we're putting out is changing the lives of the people that are using it, and really setting the pace for the innovation in the industry as well. Because there's a lot of companies that will come out and say, well, this obviously is a hit, and we're going to go this route too. We want to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to be beneficial to everybody that's involved. And so getting those guys and coaching those guys up and getting them excited about the fact that they're making the same thing. I mean, there's guys here that will build mobile pure carts. They'll build 20 in a day or two, and they'll start on the next 20, and then they'll start on the next. It's all they do. And it could be, you got to find those guys that want to make the same thing all the time. But there's a lot of different personalities and stuff within the production department at this point. And one of the things that I get the most joy out of right now is getting all these guys to buy into the fact that these products are changing people's lives when they get them.
When
Mm-hmm.
you talk about, your products changing your customers' lives, how do you lean into, where do you put your focus on to make sure that happens? Is it just in the quality of the product? Is it the ease of use? Is it, the support you provide them after they have it so that they can shorten the cycle to getting the most out of it? I mean, how do you kind of help them make that transition so that it does have the effect in their business?
I mean, it's all those things, right? You've got to have a staff that full time is ready to answer the phone call, right? Because it's not, we don't have commission guys here. That's not what we have that are answering the phone. They're not trying to sell anybody anything. They're trying to help you get to whatever you need. And most of the calls that we get during the busy season are not necessarily sales calls anyway. They are, I'm at this job site and I'm cleaning this window, and this is what happens when I do it. What am I doing wrong? Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's when we got to the point where we could hire 2 or 3 people that could take those calls on a full-time basis, and we weren't trying to just push product to people. That was a game changer. I mean, another thing that we really focus on is everything that we're doing, we try and make it the best version of that, right? I remember when we went from pneumatic air tires on all these mobile carts to a flat free tire, right? Just the simple changes. Those flat free tires are a lot more expensive to us than a pneumatic rubber Chinese made air tire. But the user's never going to have to worry about it being flat and not being able to wheel it across the property. They're never going to have to worry about the
Mm-hmm.
hub on it rusting out and having to replace it, because they're a whole lot better than that. That doesn't happen with these tires. We've tried a number of different things that we do that ultimately, from a product innovation standpoint, have worked out really well for us. The technology and the purification, for instance, we tend to use much more expensive components for purification. And the other thing that we really focus on here, and it's a difficult one because we can't control this nearly as much, is safety. Um, years ago, we went through a lot of effort to get our poles tested for electrocution, insulation, if you will. And we were the first company, and I don't know if anybody's done this since, we were the first company to hire a third-party engineering firm to basically test a finished product and tell us if the product could protect someone in an accident, right? So these things happen a lot around the world. People don't think about it much, but you're working with a telescoping pole that's essentially a conductor of electricity. And most of these accidents happen when somebody's got a pole 30, 40, 50 feet in the air and they lose control of it. So, they might hit a power line, and people get hurt, and people pass away. So the reason we went down that path was we were trying to essentially make a product that could potentially save your life. Well, there's so many variables in that, right? When you think about what we were able to accomplish, we did that, but it'll only work if you follow this protocol when you're using it. And so, if somebody's losing control of a water-fed pole, they don't necessarily have the forethought of using it the same way they were using it when they weren't trying to stop it from falling. So the bottom section of all these poles is yellow, and that section is isolated from electrical current. So what we had tested was if an electrical current touched the top of the pole, would that bottom section stop the current? Would it stop right there? And the lab basically came back and said, yes, you've accomplished this. And it's not rocket science, right? But we
Yeah.
wanted a third party lab to tell us that it was actually working before we went out and said it. But when somebody's losing control of the pole, they tend to reach up higher and grab the next section up. And now that's all out of the window, right? That's not working anymore, that isolation. So what we do with the poles from a safety standpoint is we still build that in. And on every single pole, there's actually in the packaging information on all these things to keep you safe. And there's also on the pole a QR code that, as the user, which may not be the person who bought it, as the user, you could scan that and there's a video that talks about safety features and all these things. And so, to my knowledge, we're the only ones doing that. But I mean, it's across the board. If it's innovation or quality of life for the end user or whatever it may be, I mean, we try to stay focused on the people that are involved on the other end of the purchase, and keep that at the forefront of everything we do.
So I I think that's great. I never would have thought of that. You think keeping people on the ground versus going up a ladder. That is the whole idea of that. Is a little safer, right? The people going up and down. It's not just time. Going up in the air has its own dangers, but I never would have thought the amount of danger with the poles and all the things
Yeah.
that are up in the air around where you're working. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. From my point of view, one of the things you were always interested in is the marketing side, the go to market, and all that. And you talked a little bit about those early days. It's email, and then it's the forums, and then now today, you're Tucker. So there's the brand that you're building, and there's so many more pieces to it. And I'm sure it's a much more developed, larger company than those early days when you got started. And the world's changed a lot in the last 15 years, since 2008, and the way that we communicate. What does your go to market look like today? I mean, how are you successful? Does it rely a lot on your distribution network? Are you still finding, how do you go out and reach the customers directly to educate the market, or build your brand in the market? What does that kind of look like today to be successful?
Yeah, I mean, the reality for us is there's 5 people on full time that are focused on marketing efforts. And frankly, they would be better to answer that than I would. But there's a lot of trade shows we do. There's a lot of events that we try and have at distributors. The reality is, water fed window cleaning is not something that you really have to educate people on that much anymore, right? It's a known thing, a known way of doing something, and so it's not a product and a process education necessarily anymore. And the market is growing at a rate, at least for us, that is really. It's really interesting. There's a lot of pressure. I remember I went to Carlos Gonzalez had a event in Cabo San Lucas, and he asked me to come over and speak about adding window cleaning for pressure washing companies, right? And for all those guys, it was just a no brainer. And it wasn't like, how do you do it? It was just like, oh, the same clientele, we could just add this service. And
Yeah.
so, the market is at a place where people are just using window cleaning as an add-on, and it's just kind of complementing that. And I think we added, several dozen distributors just in the pressure washing industry alone in 2023, because they recognize that this is a perfect add-on. We're putting out a quality, solid product. And so in a lot of ways, we're standing on, like I said before, the shoulders of those guys that did all this work in the past. But from a marketing standpoint, we're online. Our biggest probably lead generating source is just still word of mouth. There's a lot of window cleaners that talk, and that can be very good for your brand, and it can be very bad. And luckily, we're putting out a good product, and we're focused on customer service, number one. So I think that's what's really driving this, is staying people centric and making sure that when they call in, they're getting taken care of. I mean, we were the first to put out a 10-year warranty on our products. It was unheard of. And I think there's a couple brands doing that now. But the reality is, we want people to know that we're going to be here. We're going to take care of their products, and they invest in us. If they call, we're going to be here, email, whatever it may be. So I think our biggest marketing advantage is the reputation the brand has from being a customer-centric company.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So what's the most exciting thing coming up for Tucker that you can share? I know you said you had a few things. I wasn't sure what you could or couldn't. What's most exciting for this year and maybe even beyond?
Solar cleaning. Yeah, we've got some very big projects that we've been working on in the solar panel cleaning field, with some specific products for that. It's an interesting space. If you watch that, there's a lot of companies coming in from offshore trying to sell products into solar panel cleaning. But solar panels are not the same as cleaning glass. There's a surface that has to be protected and taken care of. It's nowhere near as hard as the glass surfaces are. So one of the biggest things we've been looking at and focusing on is solar panel cleaning, and recognizing the companies that are in the industry that we want to have a relationship with. Because for us as manufacturers, we're not doing this alone. We've got relationships in water filtration. We've got relationships in carbon fiber. We've got relationships in brush manufacturing. And, late last year, I hit the road and went and visited, over 4 or 5 days, a lot of our suppliers, not our customers. And, the suppliers are a lot more important than they used to be, especially coming out of the COVID pandemic with supply chain issues. And so we really focus on those things. But we've been working on some very exciting things in the solar panel cleaning space.
If you were a contractor today or speaking to contractors today, what kind of opportunity is out there? I mean, is this something they should be thinking about bringing into their wheelhouse?
Solar panel cleaning?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because, whether or not it's an investment that pays off for the person that's putting it into place is something that can be looked at and debated. But there's large scale applications for this product where, people are being mandated to put it in. I think the state of California is requiring new construction to have it. So, when it comes to, people are beginning to think about solar panel cleaning like this. When it comes to window cleaning, that's a luxury, right? Clean windows. I've got a perfect crystal clear view. It's very expensive to maintain your windows. When it comes to solar panel cleaning, when you clean the solar panels and you maintain them, one of two things is happening. Number one, you're maintaining your warranty. So manufacturers are starting to say, you have to do this, right? But number two, what's happening is you're actually getting a return on your investment. It's not just a luxury item. So if my solar panels are clean, I'm getting much more return on the energy production that they can actually produce compared to if I just let them get dirty. So it's a much easier sell once you start to focus on that. And we're starting to see people think about how to price that work differently. You had a lot of window cleaners get into solar panel cleaning because they already had the equipment, right? And they would think, well, I get $5 for a piece of glass, I'll get $5 for this panel. That's not the right thinking when it comes to solar panel cleaning, and that only drives down the actual market from a profitability standpoint. The way that the contractor should think about solar panel cleaning is, what is the return on the investment for the individual that owns that solar array, right? If when they clean it, I charge them $300, right? And they never get that $300 back, well, that's useless. But if I charge them an amount that I can prove that they will get back, now it's never something they even think about, right? And it's a much easier application to sell contracts into, right? I'll be back every 3 months. Window cleaning, that's a hard sell. You got to have very affluent customers for them to say, come back every 3 months and keep these windows clean, right? So it's interesting from that standpoint. I think it's the next big add-on for people that are in home service business, especially because they already have, for the most part, the right equipment.
Right. I think that's great advice. And, anytime you can move from just a luxury to something that is maybe a need, could be qualified in that needs place, it changes things. Not to mention, like, you even brought up the seasonality of window cleaning and what that impact was to you early in your business, having to start over every year. It's those repetitive contracts that make all the difference. So very, very
Yeah, and
interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's an interesting one to look at. I mean, obviously it has its own impacts from a safety standpoint. Everybody's got to get on a roof and all this kind of stuff. So there's some different levels of safety from a solar panel cleaning aspect. But I'm fairly certain it's the next big one for sure.
Awesome. Well, Shawn, it's been a total pleasure, man. I've enjoyed your insights. I think you have like a super cool entrepreneurial journey. I mean, to go from working on someone else's cleaning company to end up being a manufacturer, pushing the innovation in the industry. It seems like you've really found your niche, and I think it's a great story. It's an inspiring story to me. So really appreciate your time. Thank you for being on. Is there somewhere that you would like to direct customers to? Is maybe your website or what resources?
Yeah, you can find all the information about us at tuckerusa.com. And again, just thanks for the opportunity. Always happy to share and keep ideas flowing.
Awesome.
Yeah, and don't forget, you guys will also be at the IWCA show January 28th. I think, is that right?
It's at the it's
Does that
at
have
the
a
it's
start
at
date?
the
At the
end
end of
of
January.
January. Yeah, yeah. Stop by and see the guys there, and I may swing out and say hi to some folks, but for the most part, just yeah, swing by, check out all the products. We've got a fairly good sized booth. I think the guys got a 20 by 20 booth this year, so we'll have a lot of products
Awesome.
there for guys to check out.
Very cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Shawn.
Thank you.